Hello, your stylish scientist here, Professor Peter Jonason. Today I want to talk about dating advice in our third installment of Mating Matters. You can't go very far on TikTok, Instagram, all these places with running into 1,000 people offering something approximating dating advice, right? Dating advice about attachment, dating advice about no contact, dating advice about dealing with avoidant personality traits and ghosting and all these various things. But how do you trust all this information? How do you know it's not just truthful, but how do you know it has any scientific backing? And if you're like me, you want some science behind the apparent noise to help you make sense of what you should listen to and what you shouldn't listen to. It's very easy to say something, but it's much, much harder to prove it. For example, people who are coaches, as far as I know, there's no qualification to be a coach, whether it's a life coach, a dating coach. Maybe there are some sort of certificate programs, but shit, there are certificate programs for nearly anything you can come up with now. It's a way of monetizing certificates and formal qualification systems. It doesn't really mean that you can trust those people or that their information is brought to you in good faith or based on the current science. Some people who should, in principle, be familiar with the current science would be clinicians. But clinicians, at least by several studies, clinicians aren't, their mindset is not often science in nature. They often have the agenda, whether it's implicit or explicit, to help people and not necessarily evaluate the facts. And so a clinician might say something like, yeah, I know that therapy treatment has shown to not work, but it has worked for me. This is a very unscientific thing to say, of course, right? If the data says something is bad, let's say, regardless of your experience, like smoking is a good example, right? Lots of people smoke, oh, I've never had cancer, but it doesn't mean that smoking doesn't cause cancer. It doesn't necessarily cause cancer in every person, but you're rolling the dice by smoking, just like you might be rolling the dice with choosing a clinician. And clinicians come from different kind of traditions, if you will. So some are Gestalt, some are psychodynamic, some are cognitive behavioral therapy, and there's as many therapy styles, nearly, as there probably are universities in America and the rest of the world, clearly, potentially as well. So what you should be then taking your advice from my point of view as your stylish scientist, would be, guess what? Scientists. The problem is scientists aren't really out there giving advice, and there's several reasons why they don't do that, and I want to go through those quickly before we do get to some, let's call it scientifically backed dating advice. One reason is they're not really good at science communicating. So they're not taught in grad school, for example, how to write their research in ways that is publicly digestible, to be able to write public interest articles, to engage with the media. And not only are they not taught, a lot of academics are not really interested in that. So they're a little bit introverted, they're a little bit neurotic, and they're not really particularly narcissistic. Now, there is some evidence there that academics are a little bit narcissistic, and I have no problem saying that I'm a bit narcissistic if you haven't worked out by this idea of being the stylish scientist. Indeed, even talking to you now, the fact that I want to say something indicates that I have some degree of narcissism. What this means is introversion, this limited narcissism, this neuroticism, it suppresses their willingness to do it, and they shy away from doing it. And even when they do it, it's a little bit rough, right? Their TED Talk, maybe they got a TED Talk, maybe it's a little rough, and they're not comfortable in front of the crowd. I mean, I have taught public speaking, and I had taught it many years ago, but so much of public speaking is confidence. And so these classes really only teach people the how-to, and that helps you, the idea is it bridges you to confidence. But if you are endowed with confidence already, or arrogance, if you want, then you're more likely to want to engage, be on TV, make a YouTube channel, and all these kinds of things. A lot of academics also don't feel that they're qualified to speak in terms of advice. One reason is because scientist academics have been trained to be scientists and they stay in their lane a little bit. So they don't really want to go into the advice game because the advice game is for the clinicians. So they don't feel like their formal education affords them that opportunity and maybe even the authority to say something in terms of dating advice. Um, Also, the scientific mindset, and this is sometimes taken to an absurdity, is that everything is tentative. And dating advice feels a little bit like, a certainty. If you want to get a man, do this. If you want your ex girlfriend back, do this. Now, the do this are testable hypotheses, but even one test of them, most scientists are not fully convinced. It requires several studies using several methodologies across multiple samples for only even the modestly conservative academic. Now, I don't mean conservative like politically. We know that academics, like in psychology, in other humanities, like say gender studies, communication sciences, they're very left, right? Very not conservative. And I don't mean conservative that way. I mean conservative as in their ability, their willingness and ability to put their flag down and say this is true is hindered by I'm not really sure yet. They play it safe, right? And dating advice of any kind is taking a stand, is saying, this is what I think matters. And you can see this in how most academics write. Now, my students hate oftentimes having to deal with me in my writing because I don't write in that tentative way. And it's not because I'm sure, and it's not because I'm arrogant, but because overly tentative writing actually undermines the reception and your credibility. So if you found an effect, just say you found an effect. Most academics are taught not to do that, to say it appears like, using passive voice, or a study suggested using anthropomorphism. I try not to do this, but you will read academic articles and you will see this rampantly, all right? Another reason is that they often have trouble seeing the forest for the trees. They're so busy focusing on this little thing that they're studying, like, what is the effect of playing the guitar on someone's romantic interest? But taking a step back is not a skill that most academics often have. And I mean most in terms of all. Like there's millions, to quote the great Dr. Evil, there's millions of professors around the world. And they tend to focus on some very narrow things. Right? They're very microscopic in their approach. And when you're microscopic, you don't see the big picture. And when you don't see the big picture, it's very hard to give people any sort of advice, so to speak, right? I have some notes here, so let me look at them again. Okay, so I'm back. I'm back, and if you could see it now, Pedro is literally sleeping outside in the sun. Okay, so moving on. So let's talk about dating advice that is derived from these four systems, these four primary mating traits, right? To remind you, they are physicality, compassion, compatibility, and competence. Now, my contention is that there are many ways to show that you are those things to other people. And but what these do are they act as systems in our brain that calibrate how much is this person attractive, how competent is this person, how compassionate, how compatible are we? And so different bits of information can be taken in, and they act as kind of meters, right? Measures. You're filling up a cup, and how much water is going up in the cup, right? And so they fill up. And so, but having these four, you consolidate the kinds of advice that you can give, but it also gives you strict guidance about, these are the things that matter. These are the things that people should work on, whether it be work on how people see you or work on who you are as a person. This says these are the things that will operate in other people's brains who you want to have romantic and sexual relationships with. These are the triggers, if you will, right? These are things you must do to get their attention. Now, you're not going to get everyone's attention, of course, because there is some idiosyncrasies in people's mating preferences within these bounds, right? So in terms of competence, some women, for example, might see a man that's competent because he's wearing a suit, but other women might see a man who's competent because he can change a tire for example. And so there is room for idiosyncrasies, but those idiosyncrasies are the trees, and we have to step back to see the forest, and that forest being in this case competence, right? And so you must ask yourself a question that a lot of people don't want to ask themselves because it feels like you're trying too hard. In modern dating, trying too hard, seeming like you're trying too hard, especially, is, or even just seeming, not just both, seeming and trying, are seen as red flags. Right? You're supposed to be chill, relaxed. Oh, I'm not interested. No, it's cool, it's cool. It's like whoever cares the least wins the game. And this is a really unfortunate approach to dating, and probably this has a lot to do with the fact that we are now exposed to and dating more people than we've ever dated in the past. And so we're playing this game of chill because you don't want to scare people off. You don't want to seem too eager. But a smart person will say to themselves, okay, how do I want others to see me? There's no value judgment here. You choose the way people, but if you don't make a conscious effort to present yourself in a particular way, people will fill in the gaps, right? Without trying, you will present yourself. You will present yourself as lazy when you didn't mean to. So impression management is a valuable skill. It sounds a bit crafty, it sounds a bit Machiavellian, and surely it is, but you need to do this because your number one commodity in your life that you will ever sell, the most important thing you will ever sell, is yourself. All right? So, based on these four systems, moving on to the last page of my notes here, so if you're keeping score of the time, the big advice is just simply to invest in honest signals. This has to do with the idea from evolutionary biology of honest signaling theory and the handicap principle. People who don't have the ability to maintain a particular lifestyle, right? And they are trying to do it. They're being inauthentic. And so in this way, be authentic, but also invest in things that are honest. So, buying a fake Rolex, for example, would be a dishonest display of competence, for example. Honest signals are more trustworthy. They represent genuine character qualities as opposed to just being some short-term solution to as bait, right? So when fishermen are trying to pull in some fish, they use fake lures that look like something that attracts the fish in, and the fish grabs it, gotcha, right? And it's a trick. Well, do we want to trick our partners to be with us? Even if we wanted to, they wouldn't stay with us for very long because eventually the truth comes out. Indeed, something like makeup is a bit of a trick, right? Your skin's not that clear. Your cheekbones aren't that well defined. But we live in a world where more and more deception is infecting romantic life. And so when we learn of these deceptions, it's a possibility that we lose interest in this person. We could stay with this person but just decrease interest. We could be disappointed. I like to say that I feel it in my heart, like when I learn, when it's revealed to me someone had been lying. Lying, it's often not a conscious lie. We treat some of these things as acceptable lies, like makeup, for example, is an acceptable lie. It's not an honest cue. And I'm debating on the idea of whether men getting hair implants, right? Because I would like to, because my hair is quickly running backwards. But it seems to me a bit inauthentic. Who I am is this man, right, with this hair. Grandma Pauline says, for example, that I should dye my beard. Well, I have a gray white beard. I'm 46. Like, this is an honest display of who I am. But Grandma Pauline wanting me to find a partner, oh, maybe you should, make yourself look a little younger, that kind of thing. Anyways, Grandma, like we talked about, and parents, as we said, I talked about in the second episode of Mating Matters, parents and offspring often have conflicting attitudes about what their children should do and look for in their partners. Indeed, the women I know from my romantic life for the last 5 years prefer me in a beard. Grandma Pauline has been saying for 5 years, no, this kind of thing. So anyways, so let me give you some direct advice though, okay? So one of the four components is physicality. You want to activate people's and fill up the jar of physicality points that you might acquire. And you can think of it this way, that people are ascribing points to you. They may not be counting, but their brain is tallying points automatically. So what might you do? the number one thing that you can do, man or woman, but men very, very much, but both sexes, is just go to the gym, right? Fitness, lift weights, eat better, right? I like to do intermittent fasting, for example. Like today, I'm not going to eat all day long. Why? Because the last 2 days I ate way too much food, way too much. And so to reset my insulin systems, let's just take a break. Now I'm going to drink cappuccino and I'm going to have coffee and all this, right? But no food. Other things you might worry about are things like hygiene, trimming your nails, for example, teeth. Maybe you have wrecked teeth. Go to the orthodontist. Get your teeth set. Yeah, I mean, as an American, we're obsessed with orthodontics. So of course, I had my braces out when I was 13. But having nice teeth is an attractive quality. You have a nice smile. Indeed, I think one of the favorite compliments, or the compliment that got the most wow from my last girlfriend was I said, "I really like your teeth." Of course, it's partly because I'm a snotty American and had nice teeth. But she did. She had great teeth. They were nice and white. They were straight. Okay. Other things that are like not so authentic, I guess. But cologne is another one. Perfume is another one. Now you can fake with perfumes, like you can get the knockoff version of Tom Ford's tobacco and vanilla or something, and it's kind of a fake, but indeed the amount of money spent is not really a marker of how your physicality is being judged, right? That's about your competence. So let's move on, though, before we get to competence, to compassion. Compassion, you could do things like I've done. Like I got a dog, right? You could walk your dog around the city. You could do volunteering. You could donate to charity. All of these things signal that you care about people beyond yourself, right? This person is a caring person, right? My investment in my dog, like taking him on train trips to Vienna and then on again to Warsaw, for example, when I want to go to Warsaw. This signals, look, I care about my dog. I care about his life. I want him in my life. I want him to enjoy his life, okay? And there's others, of course, but for all these cases, I'm just trying to give you some examples of what you could do if you thought to yourself, I wish people saw me as nicer, right? What can I do for people to say, oh, Professor Jonason is a nice guy, right? I'm not sure if anyone's ever said that, but if I wanted that, what could I do? Let's move to competence now, and some obvious ones, like I said, about, I always talk about our clothes. Clothes are a really good signal of status, of roles, of your value system, right? And it doesn't mean you have to wear a suit, but what you wear signals to the world not just how much you care about your clothes, but also your status, your job, for example. And so doctors have particular ways of dressing. Now these are stereotypes, right? But our brains attach to those stereotypes and say, oh, that guy is in a suit. Now, I think from my perspective, and for a lot of students and people that know me, I don't dress like a professor at all. As most of you experience, professors dress in this very kind of bland, boring way. That it's not really their thing, right? Their way, their route to status is getting grants, publishing articles, right? But they're trying to signal here to their colleagues, this is professional status. Romantic status and sexual status is something else. And so signaling that you have money, for example, which is what well-fitting suits do. Now you don't want to get crappy fitting suits because it actually works against you. If you're going to get a suit or any sort of fancy clothes, you want them to fit you well. If they don't fit you well, it actually does you a disservice. So if you can invest in suits, try to invest in relatively quality ones that will last you for a while, and also go to the tailor. Get the legs shortened. American men are horrible at this. I can't tell you how many times I've seen pictures of my fraternity brothers from the University of Connecticut, Kappa Sigma, and they're at some function, some wedding or something, and the jackets are too big and the sleeves are too long and the pants are still bunched up because they didn't get any tailoring done. If you need help with your clothes, send me a message. I'm happy to help. I only charge food and drink. I don't need money for my willingness to make the world a more beautiful place. Other ways you might signal competence would be increasing your education. Um, Traveling might be another one. Um, Going around the world, right? Posting on Instagram these stories, but also just having been traveled. A well-traveled person, especially a well-traveled man, is much more attractive to a man who's from, a one-horse town in the boonies of Italy. A worldly person signals competence. In terms of worldly, one of the things you might learn is a new language. Learning new languages is a very useful way of meeting people. I have a very good friend, Hannah, who seems to meet all her boyfriends through language exchanges. Uh, but knowing another language impresses people, right? So again, I can think of, for example, my most recent ex-girlfriend. We went to an Italian restaurant in Warsaw. I think it was called Stacco, and I was ordering in Italian. Yeah, and my Italian is horrible, but I know enough Italian to order food. Yeah, and I remember her being impressed that I could speak Italian. And of course, it's a lie. I can't speak Italian. I can order things at restaurants. Right? Let's get to the last one, compatibility, and this is the harder one because working on who you are in terms of compatibility only really works well with the person who is compatible with you. And so this is where you can really only be yourself. And so that can be you work on your sense of humor, right? Maybe you try to learn some jokes, and not to be a silly pickup artist, but to be more engaging, right? Learn how to give toasts. So one of the things I always do with my friends, and I'm always trying to learn new toasts because indeed they ask me. So one of my good friends, Lydia, and some other people were here visiting me in Padua, and every time we went out to dinner, it was like, tell us a new toast. And so right now, for example, I'm trying to memorize 2 or 3 new toasts because I expect my friends in Warsaw very soon to be like, tell us a new toast when we cheers to this party that you're back or whatever it happens to be. So in that way, you might, generally speaking, work on your people skills. How do you talk to people? How do you treat them? How do you even think of them? Right? Do you have animosity toward them? Things like that. And you might develop hobbies. Now, I'm not saying go to yoga to meet a partner, but if you like yoga, double down in that. Become invested in that, because then you will meet someone who is likely to be compatible with you, someone who's also into yoga. So this is very useful because if you go to places that you already go, you are likely to meet people who. This is common advice. The problem is don't just go to there and go there, right? If you're not interested in yoga, don't go to yoga. Figure out what interests you and find people in those classes. Now, sometimes it's hard. Like in martial arts, it's quite hard. So there's not many women in martial arts. And in the case of me, the kinds of women I'm interested in aren't usually in martial arts. But there are hobbies that will put you in touch with people who are like-minded, and that's a good place to start to find a good partner. Indeed, the research that we're working on now, unpublished, the number one thing, this has not been well studied, but the number one thing that people want in their romantic partners, and their sexual partners too, of course, is compatibility, above attractiveness, above compassion, above competence. I want to feel compatible with this person, right? I want to gel with this person, all that type of stuff, right? So that's all the advice I want to give you. I hope this was informative in the sense that both why you should be cautious about a lot of the dating advice you get online, why scientists, the people who are probably best qualified to give you the best dating advice, are relatively silent on these matters, and also maybe some particular dating advice based on this model that I'm trying to propose, that there really are only 4 traits in what people want in their romantic partners, and those 4 traits act as kind of meters. They count up the things that you observe in other people and say there's some threshold, and we've all set these thresholds in different places for personality reasons and cultural reasons and even contextual reasons. But as people acquire points, we start finding ourselves maybe romantically interested in them, maybe interested in them as friends, maybe just interested in them as sexual partners, and of course also maybe just interested in running away from that person as well. All right? So that's all from me. Like, subscribe, comment, follow, send it to your friends, all these kinds of things. Until next time.